Hello, and welcome back to the St. Joe's Parish History Series. Due to the pandemic, we have not initiated any videos for the past 4 months. However, with the pandemic receding and many of the restrictions curtailed, we are now pleased to continue with this series. In this series, we are interviewing parishioners, both current and former, who would like to share with us their stories about the parish history. Today, we are pleased to welcome Marion Kerans. Her family legacy at St. Joe's covers over 100 years. Joanne Kellerman, her daughter,
that's a nice compliment.
will be assisting her mom if needed. Welcome, Marion, and thank you so much for agreeing to this video and to hosting us in your home.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Now, to start off, Marion, your family has been part of St. Joe's Parish for a long time. I believe going back to our first church. Would you share with us the names or some of the thoughts about your parish, your family members, over this period of time?
Sure. It's really two families. It's the Roach family. My father was Jimmy Roach, and my brother is Doug Roach, or Douglas Roach, whom a lot of people would still remember and know currently.
The Douglases?
The Daly family.
Mm-hmm.
And Father Archie Daly, a lot of parishioners might know, he was Marion Daly and Jim Daly's son. And that's a family that raised my brother after our mother died, when Doug was a baby and I was about 2 years old. So my father lived in Montreal, and my sister Agnes and I grew up in convent. We were there for 10 years. Mm-hmm. But we used to always, for all the high days and holy days, you might say, spend it with our Ottawa family, the Dalys.
Okay.
And so I felt as much at home in Ottawa as I ever did in Montreal.
Super.
Yeah.
And at that time, the Daly family, you've told me, lived on Hasty Avenue.
That's right.
And Hasty Avenue is now basically the walkway at University of Ottawa.
That's right.
So it's not 5 minutes
No.
from the church.
Very,
If you were
very
slow, it's 5
That's
minutes
true.
from the church.
And another connection is Maud Daly, Jim Daly's sister, lived with them in that family all those years. And she was the public health nurse. And she was very well known in the parish for all her do-goodisms. And she used to be constantly collecting clothes for all the needy children in the parish.
Super.
Yeah.
Now, Marion, St. Joe's was always considered to be an Irish parish. Would you share with us some of the Irish activities that occurred in the parish?
Well, I just remember that a lot of our family were of Irish ancestry. And being as we always came for Christmas and Easter, I wouldn't have specific memories of the Irish activities, but I'm sure around St. Patrick's Day that there were.
Well, but I think you lived in an Irish environment.
Oh, very
It would
much.
have been kind of the air you breathed. You
Yes.
wouldn't have noticed if it was Irish, because everything was Irish.
That's right. That's true. And French when I was in convent.
Yes, the St. Joe's in the first church, when it first came into place, it was considered to be a bilingual parish, and it was French and English and Irish. And then in 1891, the French of the parish created their own parish over at
Across
Sacré-Cœur.
the street.
So it became more a traditional Irish parish.
And I was in Ottawa, and I remember the night that church burned down. I remember that clearly.
Yeah,
And then they built a new one.
yeah, the more modern
Quite
one.
lovely, yes.
When you were a child, though, St. Joe's Church had just been rebuilt. Because you told me your mother's funeral was from the school next door
That's true.
in 1931.
Yes, it was. And it was held there because the church wasn't finished.
So they'd taken down the old church.
Well, no, well, the old church was in Lower Town, wasn't it?
No, it actually burnt down in 1930.
But was it situated in Lower
Yeah.
Town?
No, it was situated
same
Right up in the
right at the same location.
Same site, okay, I didn't realize that.
I'll tell you a story that you may not know. Archie Daly told me that, Father Archie Daly.
Yeah,
And he said he was standing on Cumberland Street when the church was on fire. And he said people were actually kneeling down and praying. Other people were crying as he saw the church burning down. So,
How much older than you was Archie? How old would he have been in
oh,
1930?
Archie is about 5 years older than I am.
So he would have been very young still
Oh,
in
yes,
1930. He
yes,
would have been
yes.
maybe 8.
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah. So, from your perspective, Marion, who were some of the prominent parishioners who attended St. Joe's over the years?
Well, you know, I can't really remember that because I wasn't there all the time. My family were the only people that were important to me. But in later years, I remember that, what's his name? More currently, who might even become the Prime Minister of Canada.
John Turner?
John Turner. No, I knew John Turner. Yeah, we always knew him. If you name names, I'd say, oh yes.
Well, Paul Martin was there.
Yeah, yes, Paul Martin. But the current one who went over to England,
Carney.
Oh, Mr.
Carney.
Mr.
thank
Carney,
you.
yes.
Yeah. He was very nice man in our parish. Very gentle man.
Do you recall any funny events or stories that occurred at St. Joe's?
Oh, I remember the sermons. Not the content, but the delivery.
Archie and Doug were altar boys. They couldn't
Yes.
possibly have been well behaved all the time
Oh,
when they were altar boys.
no, they were well behaved. They were well trained, and you know they used to wear the little black this. What do you call
The
it?
cassock and the surplice?
Yes, and the little
I don't know if those
surplice.
are the right words.
Yeah, I can remember them, and I can remember some of the masses they were serving together, and one was kneeling on one side and the other on the other side at the base of the altar. And the look of the altar, of course, was totally different, if you want me to talk about that. In those days, it was like an old-fashioned church, if you've ever seen pictures of it, with the altar up at the top, and of course, the priest said the mass with his back to you, and the only time he ever turned around was to give you the blessing at the end.
The altar faced the other way, and it was
Yes.
back, kind of, the reredos was at the back, and the
Yes.
altar faced that way.
That-
And then there was a big communion rail at the front,
Oh,
wasn't
yes,
it?
but that's down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Let's start that the altar is way up at the top, as high as
Yeah.
you can get. So that the mass is a movement between the priest and the altar boys and whatever is going on. And then below that is the communion rail. And probably people have seen churches that still have communion rails.
Mm-hmm.
And we always went to communion and you knelt down
Yeah.
and received communion there. And the rest of the church, of course, looked quite different from now because there were so many more pews right from the front right through to the back.
Yeah.
And with 5 masses every Sunday, they were filled, believe me. The other memory I have is at confession time. People were lined up on either side of the confessionals, and there were, I guess you can still count the confessionals in the church on either side.
Yeah.
And you waited a long time to get in because
People had lots to report.
Or they were held accountable. It was none of this general absolution thing.
Yeah.
It was individual.
Was that Saturday afternoons?
Oh, yes, indeed, it was Saturday afternoon. And sometimes there would be some going on, I think, during some masses too, but not the Sunday Mass.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at weekday masses, there was always one priest that was hearing confessions.
And how often did people go to confession?
Oh, you're supposed to go every week if you could.
Oh my gosh.
You know, at convent we were trained to go every. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It is so long since my last confession, and we made up the usual array of sins. Oh dear.
So, what is your most vivid memory of St. Joe's?
Well, I have lots of memories of St. Joe's because that was the only home parish I ever held, apart from the cathedral in Pembroke in the summertime. But my father was a very dear man, Jimmy Roach, and he was very much a part of the Daly family. Of course, having a son being raised there, that they always made sure that there was room for him to sleep overnight. Maud Daly would often go down to Prescott to visit her sister, and her room would be left for my dad. And Dad was, to know him is, he was so outgoing, and he knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy Roach, place would light up when he came on the scene, that kind of a person. So I was very close to my dad. And one night on Christmas Eve, one of the first times that I was allowed to stay up that late to go to the Mass, before the Mass for half an hour or so, you had to be in your seat, and they turned out all the lights. There were only candles lit, and they would have carols, Christmas carols. And I even remember where we sat. I could take you to it on the side. And I remember when they started the carols, my father reached over and took my hand, and he held it the whole time. And, you know, I remember that so clearly. He just had a way with him that was just so fitting,
Yeah.
you know, so fitting. You would remember.
When I was a teenager, and we would go down to Sandy Hill to visit the aunts, to visit Marion and Bess in their apartment there. Was Aunt Marion still working at the rectory at that point? She worked at the rectory
After the war.
after the war. She worked there in the evening
Okay.
for,
Oh, for several years.
I mean, I want to say 20 years. Maybe it wasn't 20 years,
No.
but a long time.
Oh, a good 10 years at least.
So the church was really hopping. They needed to have somebody on the desk in the rectory at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was there every night from about 7 o'clock till 9 or 9:30. And she'd walk home down Daly Avenue. And
Wow.
In the dark.
in the dark.
So, Marion, we come to the final question. Do you have any final thoughts or stories you want to share about St. Joe's?
Well, I wanted to tell you the story of Dad holding my hand, because that's so sweet and sentimental. Look, St. Joe's, I don't have one unhappy thought about St. Joe's. I just felt totally at home there. Of course, it was a different world.
Yeah.
You know, you knelt, you scarcely ever whispered. You certainly never talked out loud in the church, either before the Mass or after. Everything was absolutely quiet. The whole scene has changed so dramatically. I think for the better. But As a child, it was very impressive because you had to be on your best behavior at all times and kneeling almost all of the time on the prie-dieux. But we still have some of those, so you know.
Do you remember any of the hats you used to have to wear back then?
Oh my goodness, yes. Oh, you always wore a hat, and I used to have hats that matched my coats, and I also remember veils that we had in convent, and that we used veils when we went to funerals. Remember that? Oh my goodness, St. Joe's is home to me.
Well, Marion, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing your insights into the history of St. Joe's. It's much appreciated. And I would also like to thank Chris Adam, the Executive Director at St. Joe's, for being our cameraman again today and the inspiration behind this series. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.